Greetings, traveler. Today I'm going to be talking about the game form created by David Wesely in 1968. And that game form is called Braunstein. 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 Or if you prefer, Braunstein. Welcome back, traveler. So, Braunstein. What's the deal with the pronunciation anyway? Is that a question? It's one I think I'll address. So, yeah, the guy who created it pronounces it that way. I don't know that that is how it would have been pronounced in Prussia at the time of the French Revolution. The time frame for Braunstein. It is what the game's creator called it, and it mattered to him. David Wesely took he spent his own money teaching people how to say it.
Now about these steins, we shall touch upon these. I had a problem with the people who were interviewing me repeatedly being unable to pronounce Braunstein. It was Braunstein and so on. To which my response was, yes, that's Frankenstein. But I finally came up with the perfect way to remind them. I got them some Braunsteins. And the funny thing was that when I ordered these off of eBay, I just generally knew what they looked like. When they arrived, it turned out that they were grain belt beer premiums that were advertising promotional items back in the 60s. I looked them up and discovered that, yes, indeed, my father, who was a great fan of grain belt beer and had all sorts of grain belt beer promotional signs, animated steamboats steaming up the river with grain belt beer on the side, written on the side, and that sort of stuff, decorating his bar in his basement where we played the first Braunstein game. And that the little steins I had just bought to hand out to people 40 years later would have been sitting on that bar while we were playing the game. It was just a wonderful full circle sort of thing. So here's what we have. Liechtenstein for Braunstein.
You know, it mattered. Do with that what you will. So there's been discussion recently about the aspects of what is a Braunstein and what endeavors that one is undertaking might they apply that name to. I think that is where the word misappropriation has come from in some discussions around that. I don't feel that misappropriation is necessarily a misapplication. I do have a fair understanding, I believe, of what certain parties are doing and calling a Braunstein. I am making this video both to educate folks who know nothing about Braunstein about its basic elements, its essential elements, and also to correct for any who have been mistaught or misled in terms of what that game form actually is, to give them a wider perspective. Hopefully that's helpful. If you don't think it will be, you're welcome to turn off the video. You're not going to hurt my feelings. But if you want to learn, stick around. And we'll talk about the game form that basically was the precursor to Blackmoor, which was the precursor to Dungeons and Dragons. Braunstein is sometimes referred to as the very first role-playing game. I won't get into what the contemporary game was that was developed near the same time. Flip a coin on the calendar, that's not the subject of my discourse today. Who was first really doesn't matter. Braunstein is the well from which modern tabletop role-playing games flow from. The spring, if you will, the source of that particular Nile, as I have termed it more than a few times. So let's get into it. What is it? Braunstein is a fictional town occupying a very particular time and space. For the purposes of this game, in Prussia, and not far from the borders of France, which had just undergone revolution, the sounds of distant war drums in the west were on the air. You could almost smell war coming. Paranoia is high, and all souls, both just and unjust alike, are looking to their affairs in this powder keg that was Western and Central Europe at this time. The matters of the revolutionaries of France and the effect those events were having on the youth and university at home are very serious concerns. If that gave you an inkling of the nerves that the residents of Braunstein might have been feeling sitting on the edge of war, it is only a taste of the sense that Mr. Wesely puts into the air with his description. For our purposes, that is as much exposition as we need to get us started for this discourse. Right now, we're going to be looking at the essential elements of Braunstein and some elements that are not included within that description. So I'm going to dive right into it, and I'm going to start with role-playing versus role-playing. Yes, role, R-O-L-E, role-playing, versus role, R-O-L-L, role-playing, right? One's about acting the role. One is about rolling the dice. Braunstein is very much a R-O-L-E, role-playing game. In fact, that is exactly what Mr. Wesely was intending to explore. I'll get into more of that later. But for now, let it be known that what I'm saying is that Braunstein is about R-O-L-E playing and not R-O-L-L playing. No dice. So little to no dice are really ever used in this game. What? Yes, they're not needed. The action of the game is social for the greatest portion, the lion's share. So we'll talk about that in more depth as well, but just remember, no dice. War games. Braunstein is not a war game. Yes. Braunstein is not a war game. It is the step from full-fledged war games held by Midwest Military Simulation Association, the MMSA, and Blackmoor. So how is it, how is it not a war game? Again, it's almost exclusively interactive and social. Again, no dice. A little bit of dice. Very little. Very, very little. Another key element of Braunstein is going to be that it is not a zero-sum game. It is non-zero-sum. A zero-sum game means that only one person or party can win out of a group, right? There's a winner and there's losers. That is a zero-sum game. A non-zero-sum game means many parties can win. Some players can win a little better than others. Determining an absolute winner, though, in Braunstein is not necessary. That's not what it's about. It is mostly about having fun with the group, doing one-to-one, one person to one character, one-to-one role-playing itself, which Braunstein introduced to the MMSA. Another aspect, I know I'm getting into things that are not Braunstein, but another aspect that is not a feature of Braunstein is a future. The action of the game does not determine anything for any future play. It's self-contained. Going back to time and space, I'm going to circle back around to that. But again, just remember, it's self-contained. It's a moment in time. It is a place in space. It doesn't really deviate from those. And then we'll talk about the poor characters. Poor characters. really, they're almost not characters. They're roles, as I heard Daddy Rolled a One say in his recent podcast around Braunstein. Let me get into that just for a second. When I say poor characters, what I mean is there's a lot they don't have. They don't have stats. They don't have levels. They don't have hit points. They don't have an armor class. See where I'm going with this? In fact, they possess no real extraordinary ability beyond the player's intelligence, imagination, and personality. There you go. Hell, they don't even have names. We'll talk about that as well. So, it's important to remember, this is an aspect that is essential to Braunstein. The characters are mundane. Even higher ranked characters like a general or the Landwehr or a mayor, they're just regular people trying to do a job. That's important to remember. Everybody in the midst of every character or role in a Braunstein, they're all people putting their pants on one leg at a time, right? There's no superheroes. There's no special powers, no wizards, no heads of any organizations, nothing really special. As close as you can come might be, a military commander like a major or a general or something like that, whose troops don't even really enter into it. Yeah, they're there, but they don't really have a solid impact on the flow of the game because everything is centered on the social interactions between the characters or roles. So, mundane characters. And the events themselves going on within Braunstein are also, even though this is, again, an exciting time, a city sitting on the edge of war, a lot of the action, what's going on, it's what you might read in the local newspaper the next day, as long as it wasn't a secret, right? Just regular, hyper-local daily events. That's kind of what's going on for the most part within Braunstein. Now, a lot of this is incumbent upon the description that David Wesely gives at the beginning of the game. One thing that is really important here to know is at the start of the game session, Mr. Wesely spends most of, if not more than an hour, giving the players a historical perspective of what's going on in France and Prussia near the time of the French Revolution, and more locally, what is going on in the town of Braunstein at the time of the game's action. That's a lot of exposition. Again, hour, give or take, before you even really start to play. That's a lot of information. He knows a lot about what was going on during that time. Mr. Wesely is very well studied in that area. It's apparently very interesting to him. He has deep knowledge of the period of European history, and much of the play of the game is really about illustrating this history in an interesting way, right? So it's my personal belief that as a student of this history, David Wesely is as interested in sharing a look at the particular zeitgeist of the day in that place as really anything else. And along with the exposition of what's going on locally in Prussia, Mr. Wesely hands out pre-made characters. Again, I would say they're really roles. What we see are, and eventually find in our hands as we choose one of these characters we're going to play. He's developed each of those characters basically with a multi-page packet of backstory and motivations, illustration of the characters, information about their present circumstances in order for the player to be able to make them believable participants in the action of what is going on in this day in the life of Braunstein, which is really what the game is about, what it represents. I will point out that it seems readily apparent that Mr. Wesely was deeply intrigued by and engaged in experimenting with the emergent concept of seeing multiple players take on the role of independent people, individuals, and then seeing them interact with each other. What we now call role-playing. They had seen this as the players on either side of a war game might dress the part of Napoleon or Rommel or any other figure from military history, and then act like that person, like that historical figure at the table while they play. He'd seen that and wondered, I think, what would happen if you had a bunch of people doing that? And so it's less about the famous person and more about the action of playing. There's no one way to play Shopkeeper 2 or Shopkeeper 1 or Student A, Student F, or Chancellor, or Tavern Owner 1. There's these characters which, again, they're really more like roles. They're less characters and more caricatures, but they are detailed in their presentation because he wants whoever he hands these to be able to have a sense, after reading, of what that person's goals and motivations are. That's really important. If you're going to role play anything, understanding goals and motivations is kind of key. I can role play this wizard because I know how his spells work. Okay, you're role playing. Can you role play it? Does the wizard have any personality that separates him from the other wizard? That's the type of role playing we're talking about here. So, that being said, there's another aspect here, and another bit that I have a theory about. I think I'm right on this. Mr. Wesely would be able to tell me, shoot me down if my theory is incorrect. But one thing I think is clear is the game is a is what modern players would call a slice of life piece, where the main character is actually the town of Braunstein. Each of the characters, or more accurately roles, could represent different aspects of Braunstein's own personality. It's my own personal theory. In a way, I see the players as assisting Mr. Wesely in role-playing the town of Braunstein at this one particular moment, the particular content of the town, the place that it occupies in time space, is critical to what makes Braunstein a Braunstein. The content does matter. That's how it's a Braunstein. In other words, contrary to some popular belief, the most interesting thing about Braunstein actually is Braunstein. I'm going to move on from that, and another aspect that Braunstein is not. It's not impactful. It's very low impact, and what I mean by that is little to none of the elements of the game action have any impact even on the national level, let alone internationally or on the European continent. Nah. Whatever you're doing is not going to impact history. It's too localized. It's too fine-tuned to this one little time and space. Time and space. They're small, finite. It's encapsulated. So, that's an essential aspect. Whatever is happening can't really change history on purpose, because history is history, right? Another thing about the characters or roles themselves, they've got kind of regular run-of-the-mill goals a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of them. The characters have goals that often have little to nothing to do with anything that any other character would be interested in, either positively or negatively. One of your 5 goals might be get the grain master to give you 3 extra sacks of wheat. Okay, that's a goal, sure. Yeah, that's as likely as anything else, right? That's the kind of mundane level of circumstance that plays out in Braunstein. There are certainly, this is not to say that that there's not drama, that there's not intrigue. For certain, Braunstein drips with that. There are very, very juicy threads woven throughout the rest of this rather ordinary tapestry. A note I have here, this is not Braunstein. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's almost that way. Nothing deadly. What? Armed conflict is almost not an issue. It is largely just that kind of game. Now, what are you talking about? I heard the story where in the very first Braunstein, Dave Arneson loses a duel and becomes the very first person to get killed in a role-playing game. Yeah, that happened. but that doesn't mean that that's a common instance in Braunstein. Again, Braunstein focuses on the social aspect, the social interaction and weave of the town itself at this peculiar moment in time. Almost all of the action is ROLE, playing. And all of this is designed and geared toward a purpose, and that purpose really that I see is the reason for putting this much time into the roles that people play and interact through, to put this much time into the structure of what the social fabric of Braunstein really is. The only reason to put that kind of care and detail into it is to create immersion. The game itself is one in which it's played out in a fashion that is immersive through deep character and environmental development and tells a story. The story it tells is one that makes sense from a historical perspective. And while the roles or the characters are genericized, it's important that a certain level of decorum is observed and that they are played as realistically as possible by the players. For this reason, Mr. Wesely's design doesn't contain any elements like where the characters are silly in any way, with, for instance, joke character names or other absurdities that would ruin that immersion. That's a key factor. That's one of the things that I think that he was trying to establish and make happen with this first experiment with pure one-to-one role-playing, pure role-playing, pure social interaction. I think it was important to him to show what in history would have been, what Braunstein would have felt like, what it would have looked like, sounded like, what the emotional vibe was, by getting the players to buy in to the roles that they're playing and help him play the thing. And while he's not directly playing anything as the referee, he is the guide to helping everyone else play it. So, and two, when I say it's a story, all that the play of the game generates is a story that the players and the referee are left with at the end of the gameplay, which they take close to an hour to discuss and see the results of by comparing notes during an in-depth debrief. People talk about the moves they made and the secret things they did and the public things they did, and so everybody kind of gets a greater sense of the story that unfolded through the play. So that's another thing that it is. Here's another one that it's not, but some people, I think, have a confusion about it. It's not diplomacy. What some parties are really doing these days when they say they are playing a Braunstein appears to me to be an alternative form of the game diplomacy with key domain play and RPG elements added into it, along with the loose referee style of Braunstein. And that loose referee style is one in which there's so much going on, the referee doesn't know everything. There's nothing turn by turn about it. It's all happening in real time as people walk around and talk to each other. That, in my opinion, is coming back to it, though, that one aspect, the loose referee style, that, in my opinion, is not enough to make such a game really even a Braunstein variant, to be honest. And that's primarily the one and only predominant aspect of a true Braunstein that I'm seeing represented in these other games that I believe are somewhat, if not completely, being mislabeled as Braunsteins. Not even, at least, Braunstein-like or Braunstein variants. That would be better. Or even some variation on the name. Another aspect that I think there is some misconception around in what Braunstein is, what it started out as, what it represents. I've heard it said by some folks that Dave Arneson took the Braunstein Wargame and injected roleplay, R-O-L-E, injected these roleplay elements into it to create the Blackmoor playstyle. This is a misunderstanding of the nature of Braunstein. Braunstein was Wesely pushing pure role-playing to a high level with almost no wargaming aspects. If you come right down to it, even as Arneson and Clark wanted to fight that duel, I don't know what the exact mechanic was that David Wesely had them go through at the time. I'm certain it was very simple. Before getting away from my point, and I'll come back to that in a moment, but before getting away from the main point here, about pushing role-playing to a high level with almost no wargaming aspects, Arneson injecting role-playing into this, there's wargaming, and then there's this light wargaming with roleplay that is Braunstein, and then moving into this much more roleplay with wargaming mechanics progression. It's wrong. Arneson actually had to add a combat system back in, and thus took a step back toward wargaming to create the Blackmoor playstyle. It's important that we understand this. Braunstein is not a wargame. Braunstein was not a progressive step between pure wargaming and RPGs, or Blackmoor being really D&D's precursor. It's its own thing, but Braunstein was like a step beyond. the, I guess, the a step beyond the rolling the dice role playing that we have in D&D or most modern role playing games. Now, not all role playing games do use a lot of dice. There is a style of play that that I heard from one of my players who played in my Braunstein-like variant called Umberfelz. He said, "Pretty cool. It's been a long time since I played a LARP." I don't think that's the first time anybody's made that comparison. But I was standing in the middle of Gary Con at the table, the head of the table where I had been game mastering with my mouth open for a second. I didn't know whether or not I needed to be insulted, but ultimately, no, I didn't. Ultimately, that's not an incorrect assessment. Wesely does show up with bits of costuming to spread around at the time of playing a Braunstein. And we each get on our own stack of Monopoly money. During the action, participants walk around to speak to other players in private. LARP could be a pretty apt description. Just saying. And I will make a couple of notes here too about developing a variant on Braunstein myself. And that, again, is called Umberfelz. Umber meaning a dark brown, and Fels meaning a group of rocks that are basically laid together in an outcropping. So, brown rocks. Who knew? So I developed Umberfelz as part of a 50th anniversary of D&D tribute game that explores the very earliest days of role-playing, taking players through a progression of play beginning with Wesleyan Braunstein style play, carrying through to my best attempt at a Dave Arneson Blackmoor style, and ending play with 1974 OD&D. I ran this multiple times at Founders and Legends Con and at Gary Con in Lake Geneva in March this year. I'll also be doing one run of the game in October at Arnecon 2. Arnecon 2, by the way, is held in the Twin Cities. It'll be in Minneapolis. It's the first weekend in October 2004, from Friday the 4th to Sunday the 6th. About Arnecon, I'm including links below to Arnecon 2 information on X, on Facebook, and also the link to the convention event on Tabletop Events. Arnecon is a con with an intimate level of access to some of the earliest legends of role-playing in the form of the Blackmoor Bunch. David Wesely included, of course. I encourage anyone with a real desire to understand the origins of role-playing to attend. I believe it can make a difference in your understanding of where all this stuff really came from and perhaps what it means. At any rate, that gives, I think, a good exposition on what is Braunstein. I'm certain I didn't cover every possible point, but I think I did cover a lot of the points that people seem to trip up on, and the most common misconception being that it's really heavy metal wargaming from way back. It's not. It's not what it is at all. So, if you've made it this far, thanks for watching. I hope that I've conveyed something that's enlightening. And if you've got questions or any observations you'd like to make, of course, put them in the comments. I will answer everything. And thanks. Farewell on the trail.